Well, what a game it was last night. Hats off to the Georgia Bulldogs. A great season, a great game, and a well deserved national championship. But even though Alabama lost and there's still room for disappointment, we're going to talk about why the season was unique for Alabama and why there's so much room for optimism as well as breaking down the game last night. Before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you, so hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes, N for no. Are you excited at how the game went down last night? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions are massive to content creators such as myself, and both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But with all of that being said, we need to break this down, and we're going to start talking about the game last night. Because even though it was a hard-fought game, Georgia ultimately came out on top in the fourth quarter. Whenever you get into the national championship, being talented is fantastic. It's great. But experience is massive. And before anybody hops down into the comments and points to the 2018 national championship where so many freshmen contributed in such a positive manner, you're absolutely correct. And I'm not saying that there's never an instance in which this can happen. What I am saying is in that year, those freshmen got a bit more experience during the latter portions of games than when we look at this year, some individuals got that were young on this current Alabama team. It's just the nature of the game. It's just how it went down, and it's unfortunate, but I was very surprised that Georgia wasn't trying to test Alabama's inexperience at the cornerback position earlier than they were. Because one thing was just certain last night. It's that both fronts were stout. The Alabama defensive front and the Georgia defensive front both came out to play, and they had a great performance. Bama was on Stetson Bennett all night long, and at that point, what you were currently doing wasn't working. And so while I agreed with you have got to stick to the run, you've got to try and grind that out, I was just so surprised Georgia didn't take shots against Alabama's inexperienced secondary. On the flip side, Alabama just had a situation where they were able to drive the ball with some consistency, but when they got into the red zone, those drives didn't convert into touchdowns. And first and foremost, it's hard when you're playing a defense that is elite as Georgia's without your two best wide receivers, let alone two best wide receivers. I want you as a fan of another team, if you're watching that video, to put yourself in their shoes and say your 1,000-yard wide receiver goes down in the national championship. That's going to be tough to overcome. But now I want you to think that just a few games before, your other 1,000-yard receiver went down. So now you have 2,000-yard receivers, which is already tough to do, and now both of them have gone down with injuries. And there's no shortage of talent in Alabama's wide receiver room. That's certainly not my contention, because it's not true. But remember what I started off this video with. Experience is king, and when you're playing a team as good as Georgia, that's where those little things come to bite you. That's where those little details matter, because Georgia's defense is an elite unit. Georgia's an elite team, and they're an incredibly talented team. And so whenever you're put in a position where now you're trying to match their talent and experience with talent without the experience, well, whenever you're in games like these, those little details, they end up mattering. And let's not make a mistake. Before I go any further, I'm not making excuses for anything last night. We're just talking about what happened, and this is part of the game. Whenever Jamison Williams goes down, now Alabama's in a position where they have to adjust, and they adjusted well for the most part, but it's going to be interesting to see what moves are made in the offseason for the Crimson Tide. Not only in the player department, because some individuals will be heading to the draft, it's going to be interesting to see how the offensive line continues to build, but also in the coaching department. I'm really interested to see what coaches will be returning, what coaches will be brought in. I'm just excited to see what the offseason holds for the Crimson Tide, because I think that right now you're looking at a team that is very talented. And even though Georgia won that game last night, and deservedly so, they had an excellent fourth quarter where they just never gave up. Because when the game is at its point of contention, who rises up? And Georgia just made the plays where Alabama didn't. Alabama was in position, but in between inexperience and going up against a great defense, they were at a loss at that point. The interesting thing is going forward, though, and when I talked about in the intro that even though there's room for disappointment, there's a lot of room for optimism, and I think it really revolves around that press conference, because you could see Will Anderson, you could see Bryce Young taking responsibility for the loss, and before they get up, Nick Saban stops them both and clears up to the media how proud he is of both of those individuals, how instrumental both of them were to the run that Alabama had. And I've got bad news if you're not an Alabama fan. There's a lot of people on that team coming back, and not just a lot of people. I mean, we're talking the Heisman Trophy winner. We're talking Will Anderson, who may be the best player in college football, and if you don't agree with me that he's not the best player in college football, that's fine, but what you can really not argue is that he's not up there in the conversation as the best player in college football. He's certainly up there in the conversation. I just happen to have him as the best, but if you've been around this channel, that shouldn't be news. In fact, I called my shot after his first game against Missouri saying, this kid is going to be the best pass rusher in college football. He's too good. He's already that and more. But he's coming back. Dallas Turner is coming back, a true freshman who had a sensational season and whose presence was felt during the national championship game. And if you think it's going to be tough stopping Will Anderson, now put Dallas Turner on the other side of him. And if you get too focused on Will, Dallas is going to make you pay, which is only going to help Will Anderson. Outside of that, all those young receivers that you saw last night when Jamison Williams went down, yeah, they're coming back, and now they're hungry. Now they have a fire inside of them. They have tasted defeat, and they don't want that again. And it's interesting because defeat can be one of the most powerful tools we face in life, and especially when you have the master psychologist Nick Saban at the helm. Defeat can be an incredibly powerful tool. Why am I saying all this? Well, because I think there's a ton of reason for optimism for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And look, even though National Signing Day is still ahead of us, there's still things for this season that need to be addressed. I think that it's never too late to look into the future now that the actual games have been done being played and realize that Alabama is going to be a tough team to beat next year, and now they're angry. So I would not want to see the Crimson Tide next year, and hats off to anybody that plays them early, because I think if we know Nick Saban, they're going to be on an absolute warpath. But as I finish this up, I just want to reiterate, what a game by the Georgia Bulldogs, a well-deserved national championship, a great season for the Dogs, a phenomenal defense, and it's just a well-deserved moment for Georgia and Kirby Smart. Hats off, you absolutely won that game. For Alabama fans, it's unfortunate. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially for the most part when Alabama was putting themselves in positions to at least take advantage of things. It's just that never really came to fruition for multitudes of reasons, whether it be through injuries, through lack of execution, or just a play not being made, but it's football. So, with all of that being said, hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.